So this afternoon's session of VHRP Virtual Office Hours is another show and tell session. Our show and tell series is an effort to give examples of real-world experience with collection management tools. Hold on, just one second. Um, a collection management system is one of those tools, and it can be hard to determine what will be the best fit for your repository. A collection management system is a software used to organize, control, and manage materials by tracking all the information related to and about those materials. A robust CMS includes descriptive information about your collections and/or objects, as well as administrative information, such as acquisition information, location and movement control, conservation management, risk management, which include your disaster plans and procedures, exhibition history, loaning and borrowing information, and deaccessioning and disposal, and possibly even more. So true CMS will likely be a relational database. It should support data standards such as metadata standards and content standards. So for archives, this would be metadata like Dublin Core and content standards such as DAX. Museums and libraries will sometimes have slightly different standards that they're looking for, and hopefully a CMS would kind of support multiple different sorts of standards. And also it should allow for controlled vocabularies like authority lists, lexicons, or thesauri. Often collection management systems are specialized for archives, libraries, or museums. And so sometimes it can be difficult to find a system that works well for mixed collections that include objects, archival collections, and publication. So today um, for our discussion, we have two guests with us that are going to share their experience using CatalogIt. David is here from Shelburne Historical Society, and Patricia is at the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum. And I've prepared some questions for them this afternoon, which should take most of the hour that we have today, but we do hope to leave some time at the end for any unanswered questions that you all might have. So as I mentioned before, feel free to stick your questions in the chat or take note of them, and then we'll have some time at the end where we'll be able to ask questions. And again, we may go past our hour today, so hopefully you have some flexibility and stick around, but we'll try to get it all done in our hour. So to start off, our first question for our panelists is, how long have you been using CatalogIt?
Why don't you go ahead, Patricia?
Sure. So hi folks, welcome. Good to see all of you. The Maritime Museum subscribed to CatalogIt back in 2023, and we've just recently completed entering our first full collection into the system, which is what I'll be talking about today.
So I'm still new to Zoom, so excuse me if I'm not getting this correct. So anyway, just a really quick background so you know where I'm coming from. I am recently retired, about 2.5 years, and that's when I joined the Shelburne Historical Society. And my background, my last job was 26 years at Gardner Supply. And within that time, I helped install 4 point-of-sale systems. So I am not a techie, and I actually, I understand in good shape sort of a business model and the software, and then how to get those to work together so one isn't overwhelmed by another. So that's my quick background. When I joined 2.5 years ago, Shelburne Historical Society had no management at all. We had just a pile of stuff. So I volunteered and I went online and I looked at probably 20 different systems just by Googling everything from Past Perfect to CatalogIt. And because of my past knowledge of looking at software systems, pretty much most of them decided against them. And then I found CatalogIt, and because of its simplicity, decided to do that. So we have had that up and running for about 2 years at this point.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, how were collections being managed before you started using CatalogIt?
Yeah, so
Yeah, go
the
ahead.
Maritime Museum was using PastPerfect 5 on desktop before we switched. We've been using spreadsheets for the last couple of years and just doing inventories in Excel. And what's great about CatalogIt, one of the many things that's great about CatalogIt is you can just map Excel spreadsheets right into CatalogIt. So we've been able to do that for the work we've done in the last couple of years.
My answer is quick. They weren't being managed.
Great, that was very quick. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. For our next question, and hopefully this one will be a little longer. How did you make your decision to use CatalogIt? What were some of the factors that influenced your choice?
Thanks. So we were thinking about this for several years at the Maritime Museum, and there were a number of things that we had to take into account. Because the museum has primarily archaeological collections, we needed a database that was versatile and customizable throughout. An example of that is that we needed to be able to record archaeological provenience, or exactly where in the world something was found versus just the provenance or the chain of custody that it had gone through. And we also needed, like Megan was saying, a database that followed metadata standards like Dublin Core, had access to controlled vocabularies that are accepted throughout the field, like Nomenclature 4.0, but also offered the ability to add in legacy lexicons because some of the stuff we're working with is very niche. We wanted the database to be relational. We wanted it to be able to connect the entries of individual objects to people, places, publications, events, and each other. And we wanted the searches to be both system-wide and specific to individual fields within the system. Finally, it was important that we could embed the system on our website, which I know David's going to be talking about a little bit today. We did a lot of research into a number of different platforms. We knew Vermont Historical Society was using CatalogIt, and as we did further research into that platform, we realized that CatalogIt checked most of the boxes for what we needed, and that's why we decided to go with it.
So I'd say my experience is very similar, except that being in a historical society, most of the folks are as mature or more mature than I am. So what that means is that it needed to be really simple. And that was my experience of past software. Is a lot of them tend to be very departmentalized because they're usually for large organizations. And once you start to do that, a lot of those software tend to be something that are resident on your own computer. And as soon as you do that, then you have to deal with updates and management of systems. And, none of us signed up for that. And most of us just couldn't deal with it. So that had to be like number one. Ease of use for people that really didn't understand computers. Most of the folks, if I asked them how to find a file on a computer, would just glaze over. They have no idea. So that was the second one. The third one was really a very short learning and procedure development time. Most of us have volunteered to deal with writing history of our town, and we just didn't want to be seated and become a software administrator. So the other thing was very little maintenance. We didn't want to deal with all of that. Expense had to be very low, which CatalogIt actually is. And I hadn't thought about it before, but CatalogIt is great because you can access it from any device. So if you can log into anywhere on the internet, you can use CatalogIt. So that was a real plus for us. So that is my list of what we were looking for.
Thank you both. So I'm wondering about the public interface. So how are you both using or not quite using yet the public interface? And I know David, you are, and so this is the point that we can do some screen sharing too, and to take a look at how you're using your public interface.
Okay. So when we first started, let me get to here and share. So you see the two windows? Yes. So on the
Yes, we do.
right-hand side is actually the back office, if you will, of CatalogIt. And these are all the different entries that you can put in there. And when you do that, you have a choice of creating something called folders. So when you do folders, for example, I have bridges. I hope I have something in there. Do I? I have one. So anyway, if I have an object, I can put it in a folder, one folder or many of them. And you can then go down to, where is it? Web publishing. So essentially what you can do is you can say, I want the world to see this folder. So then it becomes public. So you can have a lot more folders than are listed here. For example, I have things that for my own personal use to be cataloged. But anyway, when you see that little globe in the folder, that means that it's out to the public and it can see. My initial thought, and I thought it was advertised to do this, was to be able to just actually show people, catalog it, sort of right straight to it on something they call the hub, which they provide for free. As it turns out, the software doesn't do that. So you have to go through a website. So part of my learning was to build a website. So our organization is actually on a Google platform, which is really quite nice. There's a whole other topic for that. But on the left side is our website. And if you go down to our collections here, this is the hub. So you can see on the top left. And then these are all the folders that I have said, go ahead and be public. This is a little bit different. Some sites, if I click back, it's not going to do what I wanted to do. But I decided to manage this to actually go into the hub. You can actually have this page resident on the page in your website, if that makes sense. So you can contain your user within the website. I decided to go here because I found that the images, when you click on them, are actually much larger and you can interact with it much better. So it's extremely easy to use. So going back, pardon me. So here is the folder, and let's see if I can, here's churches. If I can go here, collection churches. So here it is in the background, and it's limited. You can see that there aren't that many. And then if I click, where did you go? Churches here. So here are the same types of items. They're in a little different order. And then it's just a matter of anybody that wants to go in can click on the individual items. And there's a whole lot more that I could continue to talk about, but that's pretty much a very simplified view of that part of the public interface. The only other thing that I will add, since we're on this topic, is you see there are collections up here and classifications. So if you imagine that CatalogIt Hub is like this giant warehouse, and what you're doing is you're renting a section of that warehouse. So when you log in, it's going into that warehouse and saying, give me everything that Shelburne Historical Society has. But when you go to collections, let's go to classifications. So when you create an object on your own site, the first thing you have to do is go in and classify it. So whether it's a photograph, an object, a book, etc. So if you look at photographs, there's 431,000 photographs that are resident in the entire hub, and you get to look at them all, which I think is just pretty spectacular. If you ever needed a great time suck, this is it. And then if you go to collections, now you see all the different associations that are actually in CatalogIt. So there's the two-way split. So if I go back to, so I can click in any of these and it'll go to the individual sites, And if I go back to classification and I go to here and I click on this one, you'll see that here is the society that posted that. And then I can go into their society and there we are, which is actually really quite helpful because sometimes they may have an object you find, but there may be even more on their site. So it's kind of like a giant search. So it's sort of a de facto, we're in a bigger club, if you will. So whoever is using this. So hopefully that covers it in good shape.
Thank you for sharing. Patricia, did you have anything you wanted to mention about public interfaces for CatalogIt and your future plans?
Yeah, I think David did a great job of summarizing the reasons why the publishing is so fantastic. Just a few things to add to that. What's great is that you can choose which fields you want to be made public. So even if you put something in a folder, it's not like every entry you make has to show up. For example, I can choose not to share locational information of where artifacts were recovered. Which is great. But as far as what the Maritime Museum is doing, we are going to be hosting it on our website. So they have what's called like an API plugin to a WordPress site, which is what we use. And we will be doing that in the next couple of years. But otherwise, yeah, every total ditto on everything David just said. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Now our next question is more about that administrative back end. So is the administrative interface user-friendly and intuitive? The CatalogIt website advertises detailed profiles that enrich your collections, building and revealing relationships. How have you experienced this in your use of the platform?
Yeah, sure. I think this might be a good moment for me to share my screen and show you guys a little bit more detail in the back end of CatalogIt. So let me just go ahead and pull this up. Hopefully you all can see
Yep.
my screen. So what you're looking at here is a folder, the Valcour Bay Research Project folder that we've just completed entering in the data for. And there's a number of profiles that are associated with each of these entries. So as David was talking about, there's the classification, object, artifact in this case. But then along this screen, everywhere where you see this little tag with the 3 dots, those are profiles or ways that the objects are connected to one another. So in this case, the Valcour Bay Research Project collection is a profile type within the collection profile. And if you click on that, you can see that we've used it 132 times. So there's 132 objects that are connected to the Valcour Bay Research Project collection. And it's got kind of a short description here, kind of a scope and content note of what that collection is. And all of these profile types can be built out and related to one another. So let me give you a couple more examples. I mentioned the controlled vocabulary being an important factor for us. Nomenclature 4.0 is just embedded into CatalogIt as part of what you get when you purchase the system. So that way you can control the way you're describing and classifying objects and make it easy to search. So I can see here, I'm pretty sure there's only one. There's the cartridge box, and I've used it twice to reflect the box and the flap that's associated with it. But if I want to get even more generic, I can click on the armaments and I can see how many armaments we have in our collection. 9 that meet that classification. So show you another example of that. I pick one of these, let's say round shots here. I have shot used 31 times. So that's great to be able to control your vocabulary and make it easy for people to search, researchers to search and see, specific terms. But with the Maritime Museum in particular, we have, these kind of niche archaeological collections, and Nomenclature 4.0 doesn't always work exactly well for describing those. And so that's why they have what they call the legacy lexicon. And I'll just pull up the edit field so you can see that. And here you can enter in your own lexicon to describe objects. We've been doing that when we come across pieces that don't fit into Nomenclature 4.0 in a real easy way. see a couple other things I can say about that, about those profile types. I'm sure this is relevant for a lot of other organizations as well. You might have several different numbering systems that have been used over time. And an issue we had with Past Perfect is that everybody was entering all those different numbering systems into one location. So you then couldn't search just one numbering system to find objects, which was a challenge. So what's great about CatalogIt is you can get, there's a section up here that's blank because this object doesn't have an object ID number, it just has an archaeological project number. But this would be your primary number field, and then you can add an infinite number of other number fields to reflect inventories or condition reporting or things like archaeological projects or what have you. So that's really fantastic. And the rest of it, I mean, I would say is pretty basic things that you might expect. Spaces to record dimensions, material types, the location, overall condition of the object, its conservation record, which is really helpful for us at the Maritime Museum. And then we talked about this a little bit, these relationship types. So related people, related places, related events. So you can see we might have objects that came from Valcour Bay, but that weren't associated with the archaeological project, the Valcour Bay research project we did from 1999 to 2004, but they could be listed here as being connected with Valcour Bay. So you can kind of connect to things without having them all be necessarily in the same collection, but related to the same place. I can imagine like if somebody gave us a donation later of something that was from the Valcour Bay site, something like that. Yeah, again, kind of like David, I can go on and on about this, but what's I think important to note is that there's just so many different ways that you can relate objects to one another. The one thing that they're still working on, and I'll show you this in the edit field under this relationships section, is this concept of related entries. So for every other relationship type, it creates one of these profiles, which are these little like bubbles that you can click on and see. But for related entries, it's just plain text, and they're working on making it so that you can relate entries to one another. So hopefully that'll happen soon. Relevant to us when we're working with, for example, an exploding shell and its associated fuse that need two different entries that you would need to relate to one another. So right now it's all just plain text relationships, which you can find in the search function, but hopefully soon they'll make them profiles as well so that they can be linked in the way everything else is. Yeah.
It's a very good explanation. I'm impressed.
Thanks.
One of the things that I did when I first started was because I had worked on projects that had relational databases in it, was I went through CatalogIt and pulled up all the data that you could possibly enter, and it's got over 300 data fields. So if you want to feel overwhelmed with how much data that you can put in, it's just crazy. But what I'll do is I'll explain. The question was about sort of managing it. So when you first bring this up, when you first bring CatalogIt up, oh please. You usually see all of your entries. So on the top left, well, let me back up. CatalogIt, I would say, is a two-level system. So you are at your first level, and then when you want to get in there and do other kinds of things, activities, there's this profiles button. When I open this up, let me expand this out to give us more room. So you can see there is a button for accessions and adding people, loaning in, loaning out. Location is where is this actually stored? Places that you have listed in your system, different events, exhibits, collections, which is what Patricia was just talking about, deaccession and temporary custody. So it's got all of these activities. And I find this very simple. So it isn't like you have to go into a separate module for accessions. You just click this, here you are, here's all the different ones. And if you need to add another one, you click the plus sign and off you go. So I find that just so simple, which is really why I like it a lot. And what else was I going to say about that? Oh, so if I back up here, the other spot to look at is way at the bottom and the good old settings buttons where you can just get lost. But in settings, here's essentially my email, and I just log in with my password. And if you wanted to set up this multi-factor, if you want some security level, you can add that in there. But here's all the typical information, and then here are the users. So I have 3 people, including myself. You can have up to, I think it's 8. They might have expanded that to 10 people, and then you have different access. So read, write, owner, admin. So you have the ability to manage who is getting in there, what are they doing, which is pretty nice. At this point, I am still the only one getting in there, so people that haven't quite managed to get used to being in there. Subscription is when you first start, this is essentially what you call it, is you're subscribing to your chunk of the warehouse, if you will. And you can see here that it's $540 a year. Oh, it's 10 users, 100 gigabyte of storage, which is a lot of storage for, at least for us, and then 25,000 entries. So I'm only at 200 some odd, and that seems like a lot to me. But so what happens is if you go beyond this, you just bump up to the next level. And it's really not that much. The integration is $350 a year, and that is so that they will connect through our website and allow us to interface in the hub. So you repay the bill, they take care of all of the crappy stuff that I didn't ever want to deal with, and security and everything. And that's pretty much it. There's going to be some other little things, but it's pretty minimal. So if you're not a techie, this is the software for you.
Okay, thank you both for that kind of brief tour of the back end of CatalogIt. For our next question, did using CatalogIt change your workflows at all?
I have a quick answer, no, because we didn't have any workflows. So we had to develop them. The only thing that I will quickly add after I interrupted Patricia here is that I had gone to Vermont Historical Society, and what was her name that was managing the collections?
Teresa Green, maybe?
Teresa Green. So she had actually given me a tour, and at the end, she said, "Oh, would you like a copy of my procedures?" And she had worked on them for 2 years, and I said, "Absolutely." So I had free procedures from her, quick editing, and it worked out great because she had experiences of the little gotchas of, if you put a piece of data here, it shows up there. So it was very comprehensive. So if anybody wants a copy of them, they're available.
That's great. Just to add on to that a little bit, in some ways, yes, it did change our workflow significantly, mostly because we were using a spreadsheet system for so long. And this is a much more robust database because it's relational, so it requires many more steps than just entering in information into Excel. We also, like David was talking about, have created some basic protocols for how we want to take photographs of objects, for how we use those controlled vocabulary features like nomenclature and the legacy lexicon, as well as a basic user guide for CatalogIt that's specific to the museum. And all those documents are living documents that continue to be updated regularly. And this was kind of happening before, but it continues to go on, is that our collections team meets directly with our archaeology team bi-weekly to discuss those protocol documents and everybody's work. Because like David was saying, everybody on our team has access to the database. So we want to make sure folks are regularly in communication with each other as we enter data consistently. And so we have a clearly documented process for each step. And same open invitation if there's anything I can share with our protocols. For anyone on the call, happy to do that as well.
This is where we start to get into potentially shared descriptions of data where people putting data so that sort of matches up in the future, but that's a whole other topic.
Yes, absolutely it is. For our next to last question is, what are the pros for you? What are the pros of using CatalogIt for your materials? And then also, what are the cons? So we could do, let's do pros first, and then we'll do cons after that.
Okay. I feel like we've just been talking about the pros this whole time, which is great. I mean, I've told you all that it was important for us that the database was customizable, that it was relational, that it had good searching, and all those different pieces. And in so many ways, it has lived up to that sales pitch as we've been using it and been using it in more detail and really testing its limits. So that's been great. I mentioned briefly, we've been able to enter in all those different numbering systems without cluttering up that object ID number. That was the biggest challenge for me using Past Perfect. So it's been great to have that particular problem solved. So yeah, I mean, pros, there's plenty.
Yeah, for me, it was just the ability of being that simple. And what's nice is, let's see if I can go in here, is if I, well, let me share the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. Sorry. If I go here and share, is the simplicity. So if I actually was going to go in here and create an object, you can either have no media, which means no picture, if you're going to use like a PDF file, or if you're going to have a photo. And if I clicked on photo, it's going to go off and off I go to find a picture somewhere and click on it. So what I could potentially do is, let's say we got a whole room of donations. I could actually go in there, click no media, and then already it's going, here's that, it says, what do you want to classify this as? And if I clicked an object and said done, here we are, we're all set for a picture. And I can go in there and immediately start to describe what I'm seeing. And the nice part is it would actually create an object ID. So I could stand right at that object, like a chair or something, write that ID on a piece of tape or something and stick it on there. And now I have a record of it and in CatalogIt that I could come back somewhere and finish recording the information. So that to me was I really liked that part of it. So the con, since I'm here, is that I mentioned that it was a very flat system. This is all the data that you have that you can add, but then every time you do this, there's more and more and more data. So it's just everywhere, and you have to go finding the specific data fields that you want to put in. So that's not, it's very quick because you start to know where to go for everything.
Yeah. Should I give a few cons?
Yes.
What's
Yep.
yeah.
Give
Okay.
some cons,
All right, I'll give a
Patricia.
few cons. Okay. Yeah, like David was just saying, the data is everywhere, and you have to be conscious and controlled about the way that you're recording it so that it's consistent and accessible in the future. So CatalogIt does have a search feature to be able to search every field in the entire database at once. So you can get around the inconsistencies a little bit, but it is very important to record your data consistently. And that's why we've created that manual for that reason, so that folks that are entering data have a real clear guide for how they're going to do it. Other cons, a little bit around the controlled vocabulary. I talked about that. Our collections in some cases are very specific, very niche, and don't fit within widely accepted authority files like Nomenclature 4.0. So we need to add in those legacy lexicons. Adds in an extra step, because if you have some that have legacy lexicons and some that have that have Nomenclature 4.0, it can make it a little bit messy. So we're still working on figuring that part out. And then the biggest con, I would say, and I've seen it kind of running around in the comments, is the cost. So it is, I mean, largely an affordable database. But you're talking $540 a year for the basic museum subscription. And there's a number of different subscriptions that one could choose from, but we're working, it seems like David and I both are working with that museum subscription. And then we're going to eventually need to purchase additional storage space. So 100 gigabytes is a lot of storage, but when you're talking about thousands of objects and multiple high resolution photographs associated with each of those objects, it kind of eats up that 100 gigabytes pretty quickly. So that is going to be a challenge for us. We're going to have to kind of balance how much information we put about each object on the system, and how much of it is just listing file paths that link to our internal server, for folks to be able to find associated resources. So for this Valcour Bay research project that we've just finished, we did put in all of the high resolution photographs, and we're just trying to get a sense of really how much storage space that's taking up as we plan for how we want to do this going forward.
Yeah, I would say the negatives are, I know that a lot of folks don't have much of a budget. Compared to other software systems, this is dirt cheap. This is really inexpensive. The other ones, Past Perfect, when I looked at that, you had to pay by user, and it was a small fortune, you know, to do that. And then the complexity of it all and managing it. So anyway, but this system, I have, let me get into a little bit of detail to talk about how you can manage sort of the cost. I can go here. And oh, I didn't bring the other file, but anyway, so one of the first times that I was doing this, there are different sizes of files. So it is a JPEG file, which is something that you could move back and forth through the internet. And then there are TIFF files, TIFF files, which are very high resolution. And I clicked on a TIFF file to upload it, and CatalogIt would take it. But it was taking forever because of our connection. And then I realized, you know what, people don't need to see that. So we use JPEG files, which are smaller, and manage it that way. But what I have in the background is this item number becomes a folder number. I should have brought that up, but if you can imagine, you know, you go into a folder system and somewhere, oh, look at that. Maybe I am smarter than I thought. Open that up. No, it's looking for something else. But anyway, so if you go into a folder system, each number that I have from CatalogIt has a separate folder. Within that folder, we'll have this image, the JPEG image, the TIFF files, and then any other information that I happen to find. You know, if I might create a Word document that keeps notes about everything. So really locally, I am managing that on a separate drive and have that drive copied to 2 other places. So that helps to manage the amount of space that you're using on CatalogIt and helps to keep that cost down. Because when you think about it, people are thrilled just to see this. You know, if they really wanted the places that I would use a detailed image might be, well, let's see if I can find one, is where I really want to see what's in the background. And there are, for example, this image here, I had the original image and I really scanned it at a very high resolution so I could blow it up and I could see this section of it to try and figure out what this object is in the background. So that might be a reason why I actually do a TIFF file for that. So anyway, that's how I managed that for the cost. And I was surprised about here is the pricing, because you look at this and it goes annual price and it's $540. And I went, hey, that's great. And then we went to use the hub. And they really didn't say that, by the way, you had to pay for that integration every year. So that was kind of a gotcha for me. So that did drive the price up to about $1,000. But considering what we're trying to do with it, you know, at this point, we still have enough of a budget to cover for that. And that's one of the reasons why I did the website, because our focus is really about outreach. So it's one thing to have a sort of a newsletter once a month, but to have a website where people can go in and see all kinds of other things on their own leisure time was a big plus for us. And, you know, marketing is sort of everything. it's great to get all this information together, but if nobody knows about it, it's not much good.
So our last question was specifically about the cost, and so we've already been talking about that a little bit more. And Angie threw a question in the chat here about the API add-on, and so I think if you all could expand on that a little bit more, is that $350 a month for the API? Is that to do? Is that the hub, or is that more specifically the integration of that into your own website? Does the hub, is that just part of your being part of CatalogIt, or do you have to pay that extra API integration add-on to do that?
Actually go into CatalogIt when we first started, and there is I can't remember the address, but there is a physical or not a physical, but a URL that will take you into your hub account, but you need to be able to log into it. So and then what we did was we set up a site, a website, and the problem was we weren't integrated into the website. So what was happening is people were going to CatalogIt and it was coming up as a not secure. This is the techie part that just drove me crazy. So it was the notion that we had to have our own site secure. Trying to think of the term, if you guys can remember what that would be. Not licensed, but a certificate. So anyway, you get a certificate for your own site that says, hey, by the way, you're secure. And then they give you for $350 a year, they come in, they set up that integration, and then you're off and running, and they get rid of the not secure portion. But they kept the fee going all along. So it's sort of an underlying fee.
Okay. Cher does point out that that there is not a digital preservation option as part of CatalogIt. So again, the difference, there's a preservation system is an entirely different kind of system, and often it does have collection management in it. But I'm kind of thinking about that is that CatalogIt does not do preservation, digital preservation. So that's a good shout, Cher. Thank you.
What do you mean by digital preservation?
So Preservica, for example, is a platform that does digital preservation, and part of the preservation piece of things is storage in multiple places, so different geographic regions, being able to migrate your objects and reformat them through the system. Checksums, which are a digital fingerprint that is used for files, and it can track any changes that might happen in degradation to digital files. So yeah, a lot of those preservation pieces aren't built into CatalogIt. So it is more of a collection management system only, and not a digital preservation system.
Why I asked was because one of the things that CatalogIt does is if I upload an image, CatalogIt grabs that file and it keeps a copy of that file. And anytime I ask for an image in different formats, it keeps that original copy and will pull it down. So in essence, it's another backup. But you're right, it doesn't have more robustness than that. And they always say, you know, your data is yours. So if you get into CatalogIt and you go, oh, I don't want to be on here anymore, you can actually download all that data. It may take a while for some of the other objects, but at least, you know, they don't come off as wanting to keep you captured in their system.
At this point, that's all the end of my questions. So I'm happy to open this up to the rest of our participants. If you have other questions, if you want to unmute yourself and ask them, this is the time to go ahead and do that.
Hi, I'll jump on here real quick. Sorry, I'm Cher. I think Patricia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that this platform CatalogIt has been working towards offering some sort of digital preservation so that, you know, those files are always readable and always going to be available. Is that right? You've spoken to them. I haven't really.
Yeah. Thanks, Cher. So I think that first of all, like in a very broad sense, CatalogIt support team is extremely receptive to individual requests. So I've had a lot of success, just from a customer support perspective, writing in and saying, well, this doesn't work exactly for me and I need it to be different in this way. And they've been very receptive to those things. And so in that sense, yes, like talking about file obsolescence and reformatting of files, they're open to it, but I don't think that in the way that like Preservica, as Megan was talking about, as like a official digital preservation platform. I don't think that's something that they're working towards in the immediate future, but it could be something that they adapt to over time.
The CatalogIt, I think, is only like 4 or 5 years old. It's very new. And I found interesting is when they had all of the ways of uh, putting them into different collections. As you look through all the possibilities, it was pretty obvious the fellow liked the baskets. And as it turns out, he was a basket collector. So I think my guess is he ended up starting to write software and had a buddy write software for him. And probably other people started to say, this looks cool, so can I buy it? And off they went.
Well, I'd have a question that's at the very simple end of the thing. I mean, you all are talking about all the wonderful things it can do. What I'd like to know is, can it be tamed so that it's not bothering you so much for a whole bunch of stuff that you don't need and you don't want to know? In other words, if you're a very small historical society and what you basically need is to be able to at least know what you've got, have a description and be able to find it. And if that's as far as you want to go, this strikes me as not any simpler than Past Perfect. Except
Yeah.
well, I'm learning Past Perfect, you know, with its myriad of drop downs and exit screens and enter and so on. And I can see that it's probably better in that way, but you're still kind of forcing on you a lot of information that it's not completely obvious that you need. In other words, I'm thinking about sort of the time it takes to take care of one object so that it's entered properly, you know what it is, you can find it.
I can tell you that that's another nice part about it. Even though it's got 300 data fields, you pick however many you want to put in. So you could actually manage only 2 or 3 data fields.
You mean that you can customize the screens that are going to be presented to your team?
Let me share with you so you can see. And share. So when I create an object again, let's come on, and I'll do no media. When this comes up, and I'll just say, let's just say it's a letter, for example. And now I'm all set to go. So you have to put in a name of what the item is, okay? And then if you want to put it in a folder, you don't have to. It will assign an object ID.
So this is your initial entry screen.
That is
we're
correct.
looking at. Okay.
You're looking, and so here's all the data. And whatever you want to put in, that's it. So I could actually finish this off, put a description in there, and be done.
Well, yeah. Okay. Okay. I think that was part of the question. So and then you either do or don't scan something to put in your image field.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I have another question if I'm not taking up too much time. One thing I've discovered that the Past Perfect that we're using is attached to the lexicon thing, and then you have this vast drop down of names of objects, which in the case of Past Perfect does not seem to include the word document, but does include the word enema extender. So is there any way of I kid you not, is there any way of like, because I think that's a real problem with descriptions, as I think you've pointed out, is that 3 people will pick 3 different words for the same object. And I think the only way around that is by condensing the number of names available so that you can't decide if it's a pamphlet or a booklet or a chapbook or a something.
Yeah.
So how does that part work?
That's
Like
a really great
when you said
question.
you have to enter something in that field, obviously, the one that said
Yeah.
letter. Well,
Yeah.
when you showed us the blank screen, it said letter up there.
You just
Oh, I
have
see.
to do a description. So you have two, I think it's maybe 2 or 3 data fields, and then you've created an object. So it's as low as that, but go ahead, Patricia.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Mary. And so the way we do that, I agree with you. It can easily get out of control when you're letting people just choose
Yeah,
from
if you have
a wide drop
volunteers
down.
who are not
Yeah.
professionals.
Yeah, that's why we have these protocol documents that we're creating. So you cannot tell the system, don't show me these 300 data fields. It will show you those options. What you can do is provide people with a guidebook for how to use the system, how to enter in
Okay.
information.
So basically,
same thing-
you've got a piece of paper with some words on it, and they have to read it.
Yeah, it can't be,
Okay.
it's not customizable to the point where you can
Okay.
erase certain things from certain viewpoints.
Yeah.
You can give certain users certain abilities, like for example, the admin level is different than the read write level in that you can make bulk edits. So you might not want to just give that to any volunteer, the ability to make bulk edits to a system. But you can't make it so that they don't see certain fields, if that makes sense. And with
Well,
the
I can
control,
understand about that. I was thinking more about the content of the field. I mean, looking for fields, yeah, you can get lost. That's there's nothing you can do about that. But you know, if you have a choice of saying letter, or you have a choice of saying Valentine, or
yeah.
does it can you create a limited number of descriptive terms that you can only be used on your system until you change it?
I suppose you could create that in the legacy lexicon section. You could create a list of item names that only you want to use, and you could direct people to only use that section. And when they start typing things in, it would say to them, Valentine doesn't exist, but letter does. Did you mean letter? And then they'll choose. So you can build it out in that way, but the nomenclature is right above it. So if somebody didn't have the little description telling them not to do that, they could easily make an error. And that's why at the Maritime Museum, we have those regular check-ins, and I'm running reports as data is being entered to see where things are inconsistent and try to keep up with it. But yeah, that is one of the biggest challenges for sure.
But I do think I agree with Patricia that the best way to do that is to kind of decide as a society or as a group of folks who are running that these are the types of materials that we want to use, and to stick with nomenclatures and vocabularies that already exist, because that's the benefit of the hub then, is that everyone is using the same controlled vocabulary, so that if you went to the hub and you searched for letters, then everyone's letters from all over the place would show up, versus you deciding to call it something else and creating this legacy lexicon, which is just specific to your organization. So that kind of using that controlled vocabulary creates this language across all the repositories. So that helps when we're looking for items that are similar with other people. So while it does take a little more to tell your volunteers only to use certain vocabulary on a list and another piece of paper, it does help to continue to use those controlled vocabularies that
Because
are
I
built
think
into
that's been the
systems.
complaint from people that have, you know, been working where we are, is that nobody reads it. They lose the piece of paper. And I'm always looking for a system that forces you to do what you're supposed to do, which means it has to be very, very simple.
Well, that was the struggle that I had too, because when I look at software, I go, you know what, there's a gotcha there somewhere. And CatalogIt's gotcha was actually, if I go back to screen share, right here, CatalogIt's gotcha was right here, because when you create the object, it's this list right here. And it looks like, wow, look at all that stuff that you've got, but it's actually very, very limited, you know. And if I go into art, he added other kinds of things, you know, art, painting, sculpture, work on paper. Well, you can think of a whole lot of other ones, can't you? So I thought that seems kind of odd. And then I do not know about lexicon. And then I looked at nomenclature, and if I click here, it actually goes to the site of nomenclature. And I went, what is this? And then I discovered Oh my God, somebody has described everything in the world. So I actually downloaded the list of them all. There's 13,000 possible descriptions of things. So you're right, Mary, you could just pretty much just get lost in the soup. So what I did is,
It's not worth your time if you have to scroll through all those things to find the thing you want.
no, but what I did find, and I think your mind is exactly where it should be, is I went through and looked at all the items that we had. Because in general, I know what the collection is. And this area here, I said, okay, here are the ones that we can use. And these actually exist down in the lexicon. So I sort of mapped them into those and said, so always choose this. And if you had volunteers and you had the objects, you could always just say, here, file this under art. And then even if you want to file this under lexicon, put it on a Post-it note or something on the item, and then you get rid of your sheet. So, I mean, just different possibilities. So that was sort of the way that I got through all of this. And I was surprised that they didn't put this lexicon up to this level, but I can understand why, to keep it simple. So anyway, that was the one gotcha that I
So
had
how many choices do you have up there for this name title thing?
here, right here.
And so
So,
how many are there on this scroll thing?
boy, you'd have to count, what, 15 maybe? But what you have to do then is click on them. And like, for example,
Yeah, they're getting the sub things. I follow, I get that.
but you look at the sub things and it's to me, it's like very limited.
Technical term, sub thing.
It looks like it's really full. So what I did is most of the stuff I tend not to use and keep it very
Is there
simple.
any way to delete them if you don't have those things in your collection?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Would there be any way of deleting some of these things
No,
if you?
because this is built into the system. You
It's
have
built in,
to assign something here. So if I cancel out of here and discard the entry, if you look right here, see it says archive,
Mhm.
object, artifact. Just look across my screen, archive, publication, publication. There's a lot of repetition. So I have a very photograph, postcard. These are really specific things, but it's really a small amount that you have here. So at a very high level, you can keep your system very simple. You don't need the lexicon. If you want to start to do more information about it, then you can always add it later on. So that's how I kept it simple on that level.
But it's basically by having a list of words you're supposed to use.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Right. And if people start to go through and enter this, they'll start to look around and you can always say, oh, all right, they've used this a lot, so I guess I'll use that. So it's sort of a default. If they screw up, it narrows the possibilities of how much they might mess it up. And if you review what they did, it's as hard as this. I click on here, I click on here, and off I go. I can change this right here. Click on here and change it. I can go to lexicon, open this up and change it, and I'm done. So, how long did that take? 20 seconds. So it's extremely easy to monitor that. And when you are managing that, there is a way of sorting the screen, sort by, and most recently created. So if you have volunteers that are doing this, all the most recently created ones would be at the top. So you can go back through there and just check them really quickly. Because I agree, how do you manage that? I don't have to worry about it because I'm the only one doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you get into things like Vermont state of or state of Vermont.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to have some discipline in managing that part of the system, but there are worse things in the world, I guess.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we are at 2 o'clock at the hour. So I think at this point we'll end our program. If Patricia and David, if you would be willing to put your contact information into the chat box so that everyone has that information. And I think if there are folks who have additional questions or specific questions, if Patricia and David are open to having you contact them, they can share their preferred method of communication with you all. I am going to go ahead and stop recording.